All right, something that I haven't done yet is I haven't saved this file. You can still see that it says Untitled Project up here. So let's go ahead and do File Save. And I'm going to save it in my working folder here, the Dark Magic Intro Starter files. And I will call this, let's call it Movie Indent. Or you could call it Dark Magic Productions, whatever you want. I'll just call it Movie Indent. Okay, and now at least that's saved. All right, so now what we need to do is go ahead and make the text as the first thing. So let's go ahead and I'm going to move this timeline all the way back. And yeah, I'll just drop it to the beginning. And I'm going to take my text tool up here. And as soon as I do that, click my text tool, you'll notice that it jumps over here on the right to my character panel. And I'm going to open this up a little bit so I can see everything a little bit better. And right now it's already set to Trajan Pro 3. That is what I have already decided that I'm going to use. You could look and see what else you might want to use if you prefer to do something different. But I'm going to choose Trajan Pro 3, and instead of regular, I'm going to choose bold for the first thing. And I've already kind of done some type investigations, and I decided that this is what was going to work for me. But you're welcome to do whatever you want. All right, so the other thing that I would like to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose it so that it's in white. All right, so whenever I start typing, it's going to be in white. And I think we'll see about the point size. Just to start typing. And I'm going to type dark magic, and I'm going to do it all in caps. Magic. And oops, magic like that. And then on the next line, the word productions. Okay, and so I've got this type right now, and it's set like, I think it should be centered. If you wanted to check to see if it's centered, you're going to click on paragraph, and then make sure that the centering is selected right here. And I'm going to go ahead and, before I go back to character, I'm going to click on this Align tab, and we're going to center it so that it's horizontally in the center, and then also so that it's vertically in the center. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do that. We may have to do this again, but let's just start with the alignment right there, and we'll go over here to character again. Now we can look at how to start adjusting this, and I think this is a little bit small. Let's see what happens if we put it up to, like, I don't know, like 78 or something. It's a little bit bigger, and I think that maybe that's about where I might want it to start, but I want to make sure that dark magic is as big as the productions part. So let's bump that up. Let's see. We can't really go any bigger than that just with the drop down. So let's see what about 90 does. And it looks like that is actually pretty close to being properly justified. And so, and if I wanted to make this bigger on screen just so I can see better what I'm doing, I'm not actually increasing the scale of the text right now. I'm just making it bigger visually right here so that I can see what's happening a little bit better. And I might want to make some changes to some of my tracking because I'm not sure that I like the way that that looks exactly. I mean, it's okay, but I might want to adjust some of my tracking, and I want to show you nonetheless, even whether or not you think that this tracking is fine or not, I want to show you how you can adjust letter spacing so that you'll know how to do it in case you need to. So I think I want to see what happens if the word productions is a little bit tighter together. And so tracking is the letter spacing between all of the letters that are in a word or in a line. And kerning is individual spacing in between like two letters, right? So you can make minute adjustments for the kerning, or you can do sort of more general adjustments for the tracking. And I'm going to right now mess with the tracking. So that's what this is, where it says VA and it's got side to side arrows. And let's see what happens if we do it, say, like at about -10. I think I like the tightness of that. We could try some other things. Like sometimes I'll go crazy and I'll like go overboard, and that's way too tight, right? And then I can start to see what the directionality is going to be. And I think that if maybe 25 is That's even a little bit too tight. So I think I might want to stick with -10. Just so that it pulls it in a little bit. And then you'll start to notice that we have some issues where the C now overhangs a little bit, but there's some other issues up here with the words dark magic, and I might want to make some adjustments. First of all, you'll notice in the kerning between the D and the A, there looks visually like there's extra space just because of the way that these letter forms optically um, are sort of set apart, like with the way that the D scoops in and then the A sort of sweeps up like that. Whereas on between the A and the R, the serifs or the feet down here at the bottom, they actually are connecting. Same as with the R and the K. Same is true of the M and the A. But then again, here over on this side between the A and the G, there's a lot of space, and then GIC, right? So we can do some stuff with the kerning. It's a little bit different, and we can try to get the letter spacing in between each of these individual things a little bit better and more customized, as well as getting the word magic and productions justified better. Okay, so to do that, there's some over here is where you've got where it says metrics and it's got V/A. That's going to be for the kerning, and right now it's set to metrics, meaning that I could adjust manually. I could do some manual adjustments with this. If we do optical, it's going to automatically sort of try to do the best estimate based on the optical kerning that it's going to give you, like its best guess, right? And you can decide if you like that or not. So let's just first look at this D. I'm going to select the D, and then if I go over here and I mess with this where it says VA, I'm going to switch just the D to optical, and you'll see that it pulls the A closer to it, right? And I like that spacing a whole lot better because it doesn't look like there's as much of a gap in between. And that did help over here with the justification a little bit. But then some other things that we could adjust would be like, let's see what happens if we take the AGIC, because there's so many gaps in between here. Let's see what happens if we switch that to optical too, and it tightens that up just a little bit so there's more consistency. And I think I like that better. Now the other thing that's happening is that we've got this space here in between that I think could be just slightly larger, so that the words dark and the word magic feel more separated. And so you can actually change the spacing on an actual space. So while that's highlighted, let's go over here. And for this, I'm going to actually change the tracking on it. And let's try like 10. That's not a whole lot. And then we could jump up to like 200, and that's too much. So let's try somewhere in between, maybe around 75, and I think I like the way that that looks. But then we still have this justification issue over here, and let me see if I can cinch this in just a little bit more on this D and make it a little bit tighter. So I've already got it on optical over here, but I can still adjust the tracking a little bit. So let's do like maybe, let's see like what -25 does, and it gets a little bit closer, and I think that I'm okay with the way that that looks. And then let's see, it still looks like maybe this space, this +75, maybe I can change that to like +70, and let's even try like maybe 65. And I think I'm okay with the way that that looks. It looks well justified over on the right side and on the left side. And then I think that the spacing of everything looks pretty good too. So let's zoom back out and see at a distance, at a glance, how that looks. And I think I'm okay with the way that that looks. Yeah. Okay. So now that we've got that set, one of the things that we need to think about is how big this is going to get, right? If we move our timeline a little bit, you'll see that there's some other stuff that we need to consider in this background, like the trees and so on. And we could do some pretty interesting things with that. You know, whenever we decide to mask it, we could see the trees coming through the edges. There are a lot of things that we could do to give this sort of this ominous, spooky feeling, right? And the thing about this is that as we're zooming in, like we're going to animate this text so that it's bigger, right? And so what we might want to do before we start applying effects and things like that is we might want to actually find the place where we're happy, you know, with the text being big. Like we don't want to start applying too much stuff on the text while it's small. We want to make it bigger. And you might say, wait, why didn't we do that to begin with? Well, I wanted to get that set for the smaller size. I wanted to get all the spacing and the tracking and the kerning and stuff set, and the point size. But what we can do is we can actually scale this so that we can see how large it's going to be at the end. And then we can go backwards when we do our keyframing. So if you open up your text layer and let's come down here. And by the way, what I did was I moved my timeline playback head to a place where it was bright enough that I could see the trees in the background. And I'm not worried because I'm not going to set a keyframe yet. I'm not worried necessarily about where you know, it's going to drop a keyframe or anything, because until I actually turn on the keyframe timer, which is like the little stopwatch, it's not going to drop anything, drop any keyframes. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to point something out. Actually, I told you to twirl down text. Text is actually not the thing that we're going to animate, believe it or not. We're going to animate text, but we're not going to do animation on this subcategory of text within the text layer. There is a way that you can animate text, and then there's this option right here that allows you to do it. And I talked about this in a different demo, but this is not what we're going to choose to do right now. That's a different type of animation. What we're going to do is just make a progressive scale. And so I'm going to actually have you twirl down the transform subcategory, or the effect, and we're going to find where it says scale, and don't click the stopwatch. We're not trying to drop a keyframe yet. And I want you to go ahead and scale it up. And let's just see like kind of like how comfortable we are with getting it big. And I don't know, maybe somewhere in this ballpark is how big I might like to have it be, so that it's, you know, it's sort of dipping into the tree line a little bit. That could be kind of cool. Yeah, and you see that it didn't actually put anything on the timeline in terms of keyframes, right? And so I think that that might be an okay place, or an okay size. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is let's get this so that we can see how it looks as a stencil. And when I say that, what I mean is a mask. So if we go over here to this text layer, you'll see that we've got a mode over here, and a blend that stands for blend modes. If that is not showing up, then what you need to do is click somewhere like in this bar right here, like where it says source name and all of this, right? And you click somewhere in here, and then you're going to see a drop down for columns, and then you're going to make sure that modes has a check mark next to it. And then whenever that happens, you should get a column for mode. And so we're going to change this to the blend mode of alpha, or excuse me, stencil alpha. And then you'll see that what it does is it creates a mask on everything but the text, which is pretty cool. So it essentially turns it into a stencil. Now, one of the problems though that we're having with this is that it's so dark that really you don't see the text very well. Like if I were to hit play, by the way, I don't want to hit play just yet. I want to drag my workspace, and that's what this little bar is. I want to drag my workspace to maybe about here, so that it's not having to think about the entire set of the video and sort of try to pre-render stuff. It'll render a lot better if I can scrub this timeline out, and you see how it's like getting these little green bars in between. What it's doing is it's sort of doing a pre-render to kind of figure out what that's going to look like. And then what I can come back here and do is just hit the play button, which is the space bar. And you can see that's really, really dark. It's kind of hard to see what's going on in there, right? And so what I would like to do, and it just keeps playing that workspace over and over until I tell it to stop. Okay, so, and I just hit the space bar to make it stop. So what I would like to do is Let's see what happens on this lightning layer. Let's twirl this down, and it doesn't have any kind of color effects. So what we might want to do is come over here to effects and presets, and let's look for something for brightness. And we've got color correction for brightness and contrast, right? So I'm going to take, let's see, yeah, that's the only one that pops up that makes sense. So I'm going to take this brightness and contrast, and I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to drop it on top of this lightning video layer. And then it added this new effects drop down. And then under that, we've got brightness and contrast that'll open up. And so I'm going to see what happens, like if I'm just going to move forward a frame. Let's blow this up a little bit so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. And you can actually see the frames now. That's what these little markers are. And so I'm going to move forward a frame so that I can kind of see a little bit better. And I'm going to turn the brightness up significantly. Let's just turn it up like, I'm going to turn it up all the way, in fact. And let's just see how this looks if we mark this out. And I think that I might be a lot happier with that. That looks like something that I think that I can handle a whole lot better. And let's zoom back out of here for a minute, and we'll scrub this timeline just a little and kind of see what's going on with it. And I think that that might be a little bit more interesting. And so if I hit that space bar, it starts playing through it, and it's kind of got this moody feeling, but it's bright enough that I can actually read it. So I'm going to stop it right there. And I still think that it might end up having a little bit too much blue as I move and scrub through this, blue or purple. And so what I think I'm going to do then is, here, let's pull this up again. Let me start at the beginning here. Okay. So if I pull this in, I can see that there's a lot of indigo color, right? So let's check and see if there's a filter for color balance, and there should be. Yep, color balance. There we go. So I'm just going to take, there are two different ones. There's a 16-bit color and there's 32-bit color. I'm just going to take the regular 16-bit color, and I'm going to drag that on to the lightning asset, or the lightning layer. And then we've got some different color options here. So one of the things that you'll notice is that we've got this really indigo color in there, and it's a little bit too deep, I think. And so to kind of counter some of that, what we can do is we can go and pay attention to what is it about this that is so purple, right? And let's turn off the text layer just really fast, and we can see it's very, very purple. And it's actually in the midtones, right? It's not the deep shadows where you see all this really, really dark stuff. And it's not in the brightest areas, although maybe some, a little bit is in the bright areas, but it's kind of in this midtone range. And so that's why you would want to target the midtone of something. And right now, blue and red, you would think would make the purple, right? But if you just turn green up, it's going to counter what's happening with blue and red. So if I were to turn green up a lot, what happens is that the sky starts to feel a lot brighter. It's like sort of mitigating some of that saturation of the other colors in that midtone range. You could also, if you wanted to adjust some of these others, you could look at the shadow, for instance. If you wanted to make the shadows deeper, you could like maybe turn the blue up a little bit so that the shadows are a little bit deeper and bluer, like, and because what we did was we effectively made some of that shadow space green in a weird way, and we don't want it to be too murky. Well, I don't anyway. I don't want it to be creepy murky. So I'm going to turn the shadow space up in the blue area. So you can make these adjustments. You could see what would happen like in the highlights. I'm not sure that we really need to adjust that, but we could see what happens like if you turn something up dramatically, you can kind of see how it's being affected. And then you can go drop it down into more subtlety. I don't think we need to actually do anything with that, so I'm going to set it back to 0. And then if we turn our text layer back on, the visibility right there, you can see that that's much brighter than it was originally. Like if I were to turn this effect off and turn it back on again, right, you can see how much more the word that we can read, and it just feels a lot brighter, and it still feels like it's nighttime. Like it's still, you still get this sense. Now the other thing too that you need to remember is that the text isn't going to be this large the whole time. So we're going to, in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can animate that text really simply, just using the transform scale option.